Thank you, Carla, very much for inviting me, and thank you for the wonderful piano playing and a wonderfully beautiful piano. Thank you very much. Well, the title of my talk, as you know, is Egalitarian Revolutionaries Are Everywhere. And I will try to explain why I believe that. Naomi Klein, many of you know, is the author of No Logo and the Shock Doctrine, and probably many of you have read those very interesting books. She has a new book that came out on climate change called This Changes Everything. And she recently gave an interview. Can you hear me okay? She recently gave an interview, and I'd like to read just one little excerpt from that interview, which I think is really significant. She says, but a lot of the liberal journalists who I've been speaking to tell me that they read the book, her book, and it just fills them with despair because they don't believe in activism. I expected to be having arguments about the science. I expected to be having arguments about the policy. I've had basically none of those. I'm having arguments about whether or not there's a reason to have any hope at all. That's a hard thing to do all day. Well, this hopelessness about activism being able to solve the big problem of our society, it extends to far more than just liberal journalists that Naomi Klein is encountering. It extends to basically the entire American working class. It's so thick, this hopelessness, that you can cut it with a knife. So why are people so hopeless? Well, it's, I think, important to look at some of the main reasons. One, people are not naive the way many of us were in the 1960s, thinking that a big demonstration could change the world. People today know more than back then that the problem is fundamental. It's a very big problem. It's not just the individual who's in the White House. There's TINA, T-I-N-A, made famous by Margaret Thatcher. It's standing for There Is No Alternative, meaning there's no better alternative to the lousy one that we have today. So an example of how powerful that is was made apparent to me when I think it was Bob and Lorraine who were here, and myself and another one or two people. We went to a talk at Boston College in early 2011. It was just before Occupy, shortly before. And it was a talk by a Marxist professor who had a new book out talking about his analysis of the world and why it was bad and so forth. And what was interesting about it was the Q&A session at the end of his talk. A woman raised her hand and she said, okay, you've explained why everything is wrong, but what do we want? What are we for? And there was silence. Dead silence. Be my witness, right? It lasted, I can't remember now exactly, but it seemed like it lasted forever. Nobody had anything to say about what we want. And as my son Abram says, people don't get on a bus if they don't know where it's going. So there's a hopelessness that comes from not having any shared, clear vision of what would be better. And of course, that's compounded by the fact that communism turned out to be so anti-democratic in Russia and China, and people know it, and that purported to be the only alternative. We've also had 4 decades of a ruling class drive to lower people's expectations, starting when the ruling class had a bit of a panic because of the radical 60s breaking out. People had rising expectations, all hell broke loose all over the world. And the ruling class basically said, my gosh, we have to lower people's expectations. And so since around the mid-1970s, when they got their act together, and with Ronald Reagan, especially in the 80s, kind of suppressing the air traffic controllers strike and using tactics that hadn't been used for decades against labor, the ruling class has been deliberately lowering people's expectations on many fronts, making health care, market-driven health care so people don't feel secure in having health care when they really need it, shipping the good jobs, better paying jobs overseas, making people fear that they even have a job. In the schools, making working class children think that with standardized testing, high stakes standardized testing, that they don't even, they're not smart enough and they didn't work hard enough to even deserve to have a job when they grow up, or at least not to have a decent one. So on many fronts, the ruling class has been trying to lower people's expectations and make people feel hopeless, not without some significant success, obviously. And lastly, people feel all alone in even wanting a fundamentally better kind of society and having a vision of what it could be. Why do they feel alone? Well, how do people form their judgment, their opinion about the millions of people that they don't know personally? From the mass media. And not coincidentally, you never see anybody on radio or television or in the magazines people read espousing revolutionary egalitarian desires and aspirations at all. And by the way, I would include in that list where you do not see these views expressed, Democracy Now!, The Nation magazine, the Progressive Press, the Alternative Press, not to mention the liberal Boston Globe and NPR. Okay, so the fact that people feel hopeless is not hard to understand why, and it is extremely prevalent. So if we want to change the world, we have to solve the big problem of class inequality, but we have to change the hopelessness in order to get to the first step to building a movement that can do that. But how do we change the hopelessness to hopefulness? Is it possible? And the answer is yes. Now, I'm in a church, so I get to do this. I'm going to paraphrase the Bible. Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy, which will be for all the people. For today, in the cities and towns of the United States, egalitarian revolutionaries are everywhere. Now, I seriously believe the news that I bring you this morning, and I believe that it has biblical importance. The good news is that we're surrounded by hundreds of millions of egalitarian revolutionaries in the United States. But what makes me so sure? Well, the reason, I brought the reason, it's in a bag. And I need, is Jim here? Jim said he would help me explain. Let's see how I'm going to do this. Open it back, right? They say you can bottle it. Okay, let's see how it is. I'm going to pass this around so you can examine it closely. It's fairly indestructible, so I don't care if you're dragging the floor or whatever you're going to do. But what you're looking at here, is signatures. Most of the 1,469 signatures that we have as of today, the number that keeps growing, signatures for a statement that is called This I Believe, which I think I'd like to read to you, because this is not a watered-down statement designed to be a common denominator statement so to make it easy to get a lot of signatures. Quite the contrary. Let's read it. It says, to my neighbors near and far, it's not a petition. It's to the public, to my neighbors near and far, to see the signatures. The purpose is to display the signatures to the public so the public can see they're not alone in feeling this way. This I believe. Something is very wrong about our society today. It should be based on the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. But instead it is based on the opposite. He who has the gold makes the rules. The ones with the gold celebrate greed and looking out for number one. They destroy the environment for personal gain like BP did to the Gulf. And they pit people against each other to control them. Could someone hold this while I find it easier to read? In the United States, we have a fake democracy. Big money owns the media and political parties, controls the electoral process and politicians, and determines government policies, which have nothing to do with campaign promises or what most people want.
This is not right. Our capitalist economy is based on and perpetuates enormous economic inequality. Most people are merely hired hands working for and required to obey employers who claim illegitimately to personally own the earth's land and minerals, as well as the material and intellectual wealth produced by millions of working people. The poorest people do the hardest work and enjoy the benefits of socially produced wealth the least. The richest do the easiest work in great luxury or do no work at all and enjoy the lion's share of these benefits. This is wrong. We, the undersigned, want real democracy and an economy based on equality and concern for one another and generations yet unborn. Laws should only be made by meetings at the local level, open to all who support equality and democracy. Social order on a larger scale, such as complex economic coordination, should be achieved by voluntary federation of local communities and workplaces, not by laws written by so-called representatives, quote, in distant capital cities or by commands from CEOs imposed from above. We should all equally own and enjoy the benefits of the earth's resources and the wealth that we produce by working together, with nobody being rich or poor. The principle of our economy should be from each according to ability to each according to need, a golden rule idea as old as the Bible, parentheses, Acts 4:34 and 35. Work should be for shared goals, to produce things that people need and want, to share freely, not buy and sell. A greedy, rich, and powerful minority who were never elected and therefore cannot be unelected prevents Americans from making ours a more equal and democratic society, which is why we need a revolution to remove them from power. Now.
Sounds good to me.
Nice statement. You can just let the audience feel and touch it. By the way, notice the sign that's at the big button. It's our button as well. It says, let's remove the rich from power, have real, not fake democracy with no rich and no poor. That's the big sign that we display when we're collecting signatures, and we tell people that the statement is an elaboration on that and ask people to read it and so forth, okay? So that's what people are signing.
Who puts the bell on the cat?
Well, that's an excellent question. One that I often pose to people with various theories, and I'll save that question. I'd like to address it, okay? Okay. So, the point that I think is important to know about this statement is that ordinary people are signing it in front of grocery stores. We collect the signatures mainly in front of places like the following. The Stop and Shop supermarket in Grove Hall, Dudley Square bus station, the Star, okay, no, I was right, the Star Market in, or is it the Stop and Shop, Abraham? I keep getting confused. The one in Jamaica Plain, okay?
It's a Star?
Star.
Center Street?
Yeah.
Center Street in Columbus?
Yeah. No.
Columbia.
No.
Columbus. Not that one?
The one...
Jackson Square.
It's on
Jackson, yeah, it's a Star.
One next to
Near-
Bromley Heath is stuff.
near Lamartine.
I'm sorry, Stop and Shop.
Stop and Shop, yeah. The Star Market in Brighton on Western Avenue. On Main Street in Watertown, in front of the library. In front of the CVS store in Brighton Center. In Malden Center. In Davis Square in Somerville. I've probably forgotten some places I left out, but the point is, and there's one additional point that's very important, is that all over urban, liberal Boston metropolitan area, most of the people who stop to read this statement, 75% usually at least, if not 80 or more percent, who stop to read it, sign it. ordinary people, not self-selected, except you might say, well, what about maybe the people who stop to read it are more likely to agree with it than the ones who don't, because obviously most people don't stop to read it. It's a minority that stop to read it. Well, we tested that theory. Abram and I, for 3 days now, have gone door to door in Jamaica Plain, in the neighborhood between the Jackson Orange bus station and Center Street. Going door to door in the evening, ringing the bell. People answer the door. We talk to them about what we're doing. We have a local egalitarian assembly in Jamaica Plain that we tell them about, invite them to come to it, and we show them this, I believe. And most of the people, when they come to the door, read it, and hardly anybody doesn't sign it after they read it. I mean, it's like one or two people, and we've been, collecting a good number of signatures. Most people sign it. So since most of the people who are, answering the doorbell are probably people who walk past us at the grocery store, because it's a high proportion that don't stop to read it. Nonetheless, when we do get to them at their front door, they sign it. So, I think that what we have here is some pretty interesting evidence about what's going on out there. Now, another thing I should point out is that I helped a friend of ours who lives in New Hampshire, rural New Hampshire, Unity, New Hampshire, very rural. And people up there have also been collecting signatures. In Unity, New Hampshire, there was a town celebration called Old Hometown, Old Town Day or something. Theoretically, it's to encourage people who used to live there to come back and visit old friends, but it's an excuse to have a celebration. So it's a little town. There's only one street. The kiddie rides. They had a helicopter giving people rides as well. A band playing in the gazebo and food. People, selling food and stuff like that. You can imagine this, right? Also, I should put into the picture that most of the people here, the radio station they listen to is right-wing talk radio, Rush Limbaugh. Again, 75% of the people, we got 24 signatures at Unity, New Hampshire, and people without me on their own at Leominster a few weeks later, same thing, got signatures by putting up a little display with this, I believe, and so forth. And most of the people who came to read it agreed with it and signed it. We have 61 signatures just that way from rural New Hampshire. Okay, something's going on here, right? They might prefer Rush Limbaugh to NPR. Quite frankly, I don't blame them, because I think NPR is full of liberal, pro-war, pro-capitalist propaganda. It just has a warm, fuzzy way of presenting it as opposed to Limbaugh. So, people choose their poison when they spin the radio dial. But the point is, when they see this, they say, yes, I like it, and they sign. So something's going on. And they sign eagerly. It's not like we're convincing people. It's like, where do I sign? It's that kind of situation. When I wrote this statement, I believe, and I, of course, had no idea what the experience would be. So as soon as I had a draft that seemed okay, I went out on the sidewalk in front of my condo on Strathmore Road near Cleveland Circle, and I asked the first people who came down the sidewalk if they would read it. The first person, the very first person coming down the sidewalk, read it and signed it, as did the next person, as did the next person. Then I went to the reservoir near me, where people jog, and I asked people if they'd stop for a second and read this, and I collected a bunch of signatures. Something's going on here. This is not a conference of lefties. This is just random people shopping. In Unity, New Hampshire, the co-chair of the big celebration event signed it, as did the trustee, one of the two trustees of the library in Unity, New Hampshire. So we're talking about a wide range of people signing it. And my friend Jim and I, when we were collecting signatures, we remarked to each other, every time a person approached our little table, we looked at them, and stereotypes kick in, and we each said to ourselves, no way this person's going to sign, right? They signed. I mean, I'm going to challenge everyone who is skeptical to do the experiment on your own, see what happens. You know, the other thing I want to point out is we have buttons. There's some on the table. I wear the button, and it's true that most people don't notice a button. Too many buttons, I guess, or whatever. It's, you know, too many advertisements. But if you say to someone, "What do you think about my button?" then they'll bend over and they'll read it. And I do this with every cashier when I'm buying stuff, every person operating the cashier, the people who give me my drugs at CVS, the bank tellers that I deal with, and the assistant bank manager at the bank that I have accounts at. And I ask people, what do you think about the button? And virtually every single time, they read it, and as soon as they get the gist of what it's saying, their face lights up with a smile, and they say, "I love it," or "I like it." And I say, "Would you like one?" And I carry it in my pocket, and I give them one if they want one. Almost everyone says they like it, and they often pin it on, even in situations where I would be nervous. The cashier at Trader Joe's, and here's another one. I had to move out of my house for repairs to be done, my condo, so they put me up in the Holiday Inn in Brookline, and on Sunday they have a breakfast buffet, you know, and there's a guy who makes omelets, you know, puts in it what you request, right? He's wearing the button. Ditto, when I drove home from New Hampshire, I stopped at a restaurant, and they're the same thing there. The guy making the omelets is wearing a button. I don't know if it's just people who make omelets or not, but, you know, something's going on here, right? Ditto, the waiter, he waited on me, and I got to know these people a little bit because I was there for more than 2 weeks, you know. So what I'm going to say is, if you don't believe me, get a button, do what I said, try it yourself. All the tellers at the bank in Coolidge Corner took a button, and the assistant manager, who likes to talk a lot, told me that this discussions about egalitarianism has completely changed his attitude about money and society, so much so that he talked about egalitarianism and the need for it with a friend of his who lives on the Cape, and his friend agreed with him about egalitarianism being the way it ought to be, which you have to go on our webpage and read about egalitarianism. You know, it involves basically having a sharing economy where people who work reasonably share according to need, and voluntary federation, like this I believe says, where laws are made locally by people who support equality and mutual aid and democracy, and no one orders them from above. Things are coordinated on a large scale by mutual agreements, voluntary federation. So we have people who are now arguing this and getting a good reception who are assistant bank managers. Something's going on here. Okay, but there are problems. And I'd like to talk about what problems are. I'm going to pass out a cartoon that was on Facebook. There's not enough for everybody, so just around. This was on, you know, some anti-establishment, anti-war, you know, person on the side of the angels on Facebook posted this. Share it. Now I don't know who created this cartoon. Here, someone else will look at. But you know, people who call themselves leftists, some of them, read something like this and say, "Yeah, isn't that a shame?" You know, why do you hate us? You know, people don't have it. It's got a stereotypical fat American white worker in his cart shopping at Walmart,
made up to be with a machine gun, an American flag, flying it. He says, all we want to do is invade your country, drone strike your women and children, steal your natural resources, and install a vassal king who will be useful to our imperial ambitions, and then call you a terrorist if you resist. Notice the use of the pronoun we. All we want to do. Notice the stereotypical working class person. This isn't the capitalist with, the top hat, the monopoly guy. This is Joe Sixpack, okay? Now, who produces something like this? Well, I don't know who produced it, but they probably have a check coming to them from the CIA, because this is ruling class propaganda. This is the propaganda that the ruling class, an example of the kind of propaganda that the ruling class uses to make people feel hopeless. They can't persuade people that these unjust wars are good, that the inequality is good. They know that. They have to persuade people who are against those bad things that they're all alone. Abandon hope, all ye who enter here, is the main ruling class propaganda. And that's why you never hear egalitarian revolutionary views on NPR, Democracy Now!, The Nation, The Globe, and so forth. So that's a big part of the problem. Well, I could go on. At the risk of stepping on toes, let me point out that, The Nation magazine, I downloaded this article. They talk about on one side of the chasm, people are in agony. The other side is acting like there's nothing wrong at all, referring to police, racist police attacks and so forth. And then in 2 paragraphs later, they're praising President Obama for a program that he's launched. Okay, I mean, this is ridiculous. That Obama is leading the war on drugs, which is the 18-to-1 law. Which is it's entirely racist. It's designed to imprison blacks, way out of proportion to their numbers, and to make Americans think that if they see a black person, likely it's a criminal. Okay, so here's the international why you should join the socialists, the International Socialist Organization. This is the top of their webpage recently, referring to, quote, out of control anti-immigrant bigotry, which I want to point out that there's anti-immigrant feeling, but if you listen carefully to it, it's not racist bigotry. It's something different. It needs to be understood for what it is and dealt with. I don't support it, but I think it's silly to just say, oh, they're all racist. That's not what's going on. And then it talks about rising levels of misogyny and homophobia. This is the mental world of the left, where they're surrounded by the enemy, and the enemy is ordinary people. They're racist, they're homophobic, they're bigots, they look like this. This is the world, the mental world that keeps the left ineffectual. The ruling class wants its opposition, the people who complain about their wars and their inequality, to be ineffectual, to be self-limiting, self-crippling, by believing that they're surrounded by a hostile public. And as I said, at the risk of stepping on toes, this is the Community Church's bulletin that had the announcement of my talk in it. And, it says Roy Zimmerman, the Blue Dot Tour. And it says, that he plays, often playing in some of the least progressive places in America for the most progressive people there. The Blue Dots, he calls them.
Now, what's the mental image here? The blue dots. You know, it's the blue dots among the anti-progressive or the hostile, the bad people, right? In other words, it's this image that the left progressive movement has of reality. It's just wrong. And it's time for people to realize it. We are literally surrounded by revolutionary egalitarians. If you take the button in this I believe, and if I challenged you to go out onto the streets of the neighborhoods in Boston, or even rural New Hampshire, and find someone who disagreed with it, and gave you like a half an hour to do that, right? You probably wouldn't be able to find anyone. You know, I'll put the challenge to you. Take the button, take the statement, talk to people, ask people, see for yourself. Are we surrounded by people who think that we live in a democracy? By people who think that you know, the government is trying to help protect us, and rich people are good people trying to make jobs? If you talk to ordinary people, you see that most people know that's not true. They know it's not true. They don't have to be told it's not true. What they need to be told, what they need to hear and see, is to know that they're not alone. And that's why in our group, the People for Democratic Revolution, we aim to collect 130 million signatures, majority of Americans, for this I believe. And on the way to doing that, to give people confidence to make egalitarian revolution the explicit goal, to confront what's wrong today, not with defensive sort of, you know, let's make it a little bit better, maybe we can get some powerful rich people to agree to make it a little bit better, but with a thorough, rousing denunciation of the status quo, because it's not egalitarian. And to challenge, you know, instead of demanding, you know, $15 an hour, which you can't even live on, frankly, it's not a living wage for a family, we should demand a society where there's no rich and no poor, where the children of a janitor have just as good a quality of life, of neighborhood to live in, of nutrition, of nice vacations, good education, and everything else that goes into making a standard of living just as good as the children of a doctor or any CEO or any banker, okay? And I think we can build a movement that aims for that kind of society, because it's what practically everybody wants. And I'll stop there and take questions.
Yeah. I think I said in between you and questions.
Okay.
Why don't you come up here so that you can.
You mentioned the $15 an hour push. Yeah. I was wondering if you think that, given that we're really not used to democracy or exerting any power at all, if some small victories and people getting their feet wet in terms of having some success at something could give hope, and it could encourage other people that they can do the same, because I think to a lot of people the end seems maybe far away, and if there was nothing in between, you know, that maybe they could come from a more of a position of encouragement and hope and power.
Okay, that's an excellent question. Here's what I think we should be doing strategically that addresses that. There are lots of struggles going on all the time for improvements or to stop the ruling class from making things worse in some way. The reason that people engage in those struggles is because they want an egalitarian world. That is a fact. I mean, if you actually talk to people who are fighting for $15 an hour, hardly any of them say, oh, it shouldn't be any higher than 15. That's all it should be. What they want is an egalitarian world where the children of a janitor and the children of the CEO have the same quality of life. But they've limited their demand for some reason to not make what they really want in the forefront. What I think would make the movement for higher wages and better working conditions and against the war and all the things that people are fighting for stronger in any particular effort that people are engaged in is if they told the world what they really want. If they told the world that the reason that they're trying to win the particular thing that they're trying to win is because they view it is because the values that motivate them to be fighting for it are egalitarian values, equality, concern for one another, mutual aid. If they would tell people that they think the whole world should be shaped on a large scale by these values, and that these are the values that are motivating them to fight for whatever the particular demand is, then they would be connecting to millions of people who probably don't know the details of the particular struggle that these people are fighting for, and may not be particularly concerned because, people have their own lives and so forth. But when they hear that the reasons they're fighting for whatever it is are these fundamental values, then people will respond and say, yes, those people are fighting for the same thing that I am fighting for, the same thing that I want. It creates unity on a fundamental level that does not exist when people limit the explanation for what they're doing to narrow terms that don't connect to the larger issue. And why limit the amount of support you get that way? There's no good reason. It only weakens you. But there are some bad reasons for doing it, which is that, and again, it gets back to the hopelessness. The people who say, oh, we can't talk about egalitarian values and revolution and so forth because we'll lose support from the public if we do that. A lot of people believe that. They're wrong. That's how you get support from the public. And I can't tell you how many times in front of a grocery store when Abram and I, tell people that yes, we think there needs to be a revolution to remove the rich from power. And no, we don't think that can be done by elections. People take us much more seriously when they hear us say that. Otherwise, those guys want us to vote for Joe Schmo. They don't know how the world works. Or those guys think that in our capitalist society you can have equality. They don't know how the world works, okay? So I think that we need to connect on a fundamental level with millions of people, and that's how to do it. I do want to encourage the gentleman to ask the question about the bell.
I have a different one now.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think what everybody wants is life for themselves, and democratically minded people, like you say, want life for everybody else too. And I was collecting signatures in Lexington. I was the only one doing it for a petition saying that the military budget should be cut in half and the money used for social needs. And it was like you say, everybody that read it signed it. And I got 2,000 signatures all by myself from the Stop and Shop and the Farmers Market. So I agree, it is like that. And but I also like Bill McKibben, who went through the Lexington schools and is a friend of mine. And I gave him books that I edited on climate change. And Bill McKibben was the leader of that big demonstration they just had in New York. And is also a friend of Naomi Klein's. And also Tom Hartman, who's on Russia Today, has come out with a book called The Crash of 2016. What we're doing is unsustainable. In 100 years, there won't be anybody discussing anything or eating anything. there won't be anybody alive unless we have a fundamental change now.
Excuse me, but your hand was up before anyone else was.
I just want to thank you, and you have been a personal inspiration to me. You started out very small, as you described, and you're growing and will grow. And I hope that this can become a worthy new declaration of independence from plutocracy for the 21st century.
Thank you. Could I address the question that you asked earlier? You said who will bell the cat, right?
I have a friend who was called up.
Do you want to ask him who will put the bell on the cat?
It's a simple thing because it was in a book by somebody that your name would be familiar to you if I could remember it. Carl Deutsch wrote a book which was the Bible for people who wanted, new regimes or nation building. It was his PhD dissertation from Harvard, and he was living with us at the time. His daughter came home from the hospital to our house, so I knew him very well. And he was a communist youth leader from Czechoslovakia. But in his book, on several occasions, he refers to that little thing about the mice and the old mouse saying, well, which of us is going to bell the cat? And I think he decided to do it. So he changed from being a communist to being an expert anti-communist working for the CIA, which is what he did. And, I think maybe he did bell the cat, but nobody learned.
Well, let me respond to the bell the cat. First of all, I don't know if everyone's familiar. I think it's an Aesop fable. I'm not sure. Is it Aesop? The mice were having a problem. The cat was eating them, right? So the mice had a meeting to decide what to do. And
I think it was Roman rather than Greek, but that's okay.
who?
I think it was a Roman author, not
Oh, okay.
not Aesop.
Okay. So one mouse had a proposal. He said, let's put hang a bell around the neck of the cat, and that way, when the cat's near, we'll hear him, we can run away and be safe. And they all voted in favor of that, and they were leaving. But before they all left, one little mouse in the back of the room said, wait. Who will bell the cat? And it's wonderful. I refer to that fable to make points many times. Let me explain how I think we can remove the rich from power. This comes up in front of grocery stores all the time, and people nod their head in approval and leave with much greater respect for us when they hear this than before they hear it. The way we can remove the rich from power is we persuade, we demonstrate to hundreds of millions of Americans that they're not alone. In fact, they're a majority in wanting to remove the rich from power and have an egalitarian society. When people know that they're in the majority around that shared vision and goal, they will have the confidence that's lacking desperately now to build large organizations to make that goal explicit and demonstrate their determination to win it in various ways. And when that is happening on a large scale, it then becomes possible, certainly not today, but it then becomes realistically possible to call on a critical mass of soldiers in the American military forces to refuse to obey orders when they get them to attack this revolutionary egalitarian movement, and instead to use their weapons to help defend the movement from any who would attack it violently. And if you get a critical mass of soldiers to do that, that's how you can remove the rich from power. Now, how possible is that? Keep in mind, in terms of judging the plausibility of this happening, in 1975, Nixon had to withdraw troops from Vietnam. The main reason that he had to withdraw troops from Vietnam, after the fact that the Vietnamese were fighting so hard, is that the brass were telling Nixon that they no longer had an army that would fight. American GIs were refusing to fight. It wasn't just fragging officers, it was refusal to fight lots of different ways, from getting stoned, making themselves unable to fight, going out on patrols and pretending to fight but not really fighting, arranging for informal truces, we no shoot, you no shoot with the Viet Cong. The army was refusing to fight because they had seen through the propaganda and they realized that they were there not defending freedom but putting down a popular insurrection against the Vietnamese dictatorship. Now, if the American army will refuse to fight foreigners for whom they've gone to boot camp and been trained with racist propaganda, to view as an enemy they should shoot and kill, if they refuse to shoot foreigners, how much more likely is it that they would refuse to shoot their own fellow Americans, people that are their own relatives and neighbors and family? So it's not out of the question. And other examples I could give. Regimes fall when militaries refused orders to attack the opposition. It's happened historically. Happened in 1917 in February. That's how the Tsar lost power. So, we could go on. The Shah of Iran, same thing. Militaries don't always follow orders to attack the enemies of the state. So, yeah.
Okay. I haven't asked a question. Go ahead, ask it.
Lenny.
I'm going to play the cynic here for a while. The fact that you can approach people at supermarkets and places, and they can sound very sincere and believing them. Who says that a week later they haven't completely forgotten it? I mean, there's nothing following it up. A lot of people will be polite. New Englanders are very polite when you talk to them one-on-one, but they may not even remember what they're signing a week later. And so how are you going to build a movement, basically, and get these people to actually act on their beliefs?
Excellent question again. It's true, people sign, they don't necessarily, change their life because they signed something. The impact on people of having our current 1,400 signatures is that some individuals are impressed enough to start changing their life in some ways, but most are not. The impact of having 10,000 signatures probably affect a few more people, 100,000 more, 1 million, quite a bit more, and so forth. The hopelessness is, as I said, it's so thick you can cut it with a knife, and the task that we have is to turn that hopelessness around by letting people see that they're not alone. And that's not something that happens overnight, I agree, but that's the most important thing for us to do today, and that's what we're doing it. Now, additionally, we are encouraging people to do as we are doing in Jamaica Plain and in Brighton. My son lives in Jamaica Plain, I live in Brighton. We're letting people know that there is a local assembly of Jamaica Plain Egalitarians and a local assembly of Brighton Egalitarians. It meets monthly in the Nate Smith House in Jamaica Plain and in the Community Center in Oak Square in Brighton. And we're putting up posters, some examples of which are by the books, which explain to people that the local assembly is open to people who support equality in the sense of no rich and no poor, and mutual aid, and only such people. That in an egalitarian society, the local assembly would be the only lawmaking body that people in Brighton or Jamaica Plain, would have to obey. And we are inviting people to join us in writing examples of such laws, like the one in Jamaica Plain we posted. The law's title is Gentrification is Illegal. It starts out by saying doctors and scientists and so forth are welcome to live in Jamaica Plain, but nobody will be forced to leave their home involuntarily because of any economic coercion or anything else, okay? And discussing, how, the ramifications of that. And the one in Brighton went up, public transportation is free. and explaining that everybody who does useful work in society is paid for it by doing that work. That's the work that produced the entire MBTA, from the trains to the rails to the driving and the maintenance. And they shouldn't have to pay anyone extra. They ride for free, and so on. The idea is to, over a period of time, for people to start getting used to seeing these things, to talking about them with their friends and neighbors. Is already starting to happen on a little scale that we hear about, when we talk to people. And to make the egalitarian alternative one which is vivid in people's minds because they've seen it applied with laws for their own community, and one where people are starting to say, well, why don't we make it this way? What's to stop us? And, get into those conversations and become aware of other people, other towns. So if you want to do that in your town, let me know. I'll give you all the help we can.
I have a couple of comments. One is, a couple of 100 years ago, almost, there were two communities, one here in Boston, Brook Farm, and the other one, the farm where I grew up, in Phalanx, New Jersey, Upland. Well, difference in Brook Farm, they were all intellectuals. They didn't know how to deal with the land. In Jersey, they were rich farmers, actually, at the time, who gave up their possessions and set up a co-op, Phalanx, a co-op. And they were concrete. And they had, the letters went back and forth to Brook Farm, the letters went back and forth to the Tribune, and all kinds of famous people. But concretely, in Jersey, the women wore bloomers into Red Bank, and they created the first economically viable canning plant in the country. Okay. But it was this egalitarian thing that you're talking about. Both of them collapsed. Okay? But today, and I've been working since I've been a child and heard it really, earliest political thing I can remember being 6 years old and hearing a very violent confrontation between communism and Democratic Party and politics in the 30s. I was 6 years old. And I had my rear end spanked because I said something, well, aren't the communists good? Okay. That's true. But today, my experience has been that, yes, people accept the egalitarian, but people also need the concrete. We need those concrete, and yes, you win those, though that doesn't change the system, but it says a victory can be won, so that the piece is to coordinate many of the things that are going around now which say, yes, I can make life better for you or for my neighbor or my mother or etc. with the larger piece. And I just don't, egalitarian is nice, and it's my piece of talking the history is it's American is A, B, C, D, But we need to move from there, and today two big pieces are that the economy is a world economy and the environmental crisis is a world environmental crisis. And you should know from Harvard, I worked in the 60s, and Roger Revelle was brought in, which was the first real consciousness of what the environmental crisis was going to be. I'm not going to talk about politics, I'm talking about the science.
You make very important points. It's true. It's easier for people to defend what they have than to fight for something they don't yet have. And we've been trying to figure out how to take advantage of that fact. And the egalitarian assembly is a sort of a halfway measure to create a sort of something that people have that has a sort of aspect of defending it and envisioning how it should be larger. But I agree. The problem, of course, with these small egalitarian communities is that the trap that we need to avoid is equating an egalitarian revolutionary movement with one that just wants to share the poverty. And for lack of owning the real wealth of the country, the vast farmland, the industrial wealth, the mines and so forth, for lack of owning that, we can't have a true sharing economy that people prosper. And so we have to avoid the trap of abandoning the goal of society owning all that wealth. And it's a difficult thing to do. But on the other hand, what you point out is true. Having something to defend is easier than trying to get something you don't yet have. So.
Anybody else want to speak? Thanks, Steve's hand.
Why are you ignoring me?
I'm seeing, because Steve had his hand up first.
All right, I'll wait another 10 minutes.
you'll be-
I raised it 5 times, and you're right there. Thank you.
Yeah, but nobody from that side of the room has had it at all.
I'll move over there, make sure
Yeah, hi, John. Thank you for the presentation. Could you address the fact that we now live in an atomized society where people are encouraged and go along with it to sit in their living room and watch television rather than associate with one another? When I was a kid, there were public speaking venues in all the cities. Union Square in New York, the Common here, Bunkhouse Square in Los Angeles, all over the place. People went to theaters all the time and associated with hundreds of other people at a time. And this was a very common experience for people. Nowadays, people are encouraged to sit in their living room and not associate with other people and get all they get all this boss class propaganda fed directly into their minds. I myself will not look at television. I loathe it. And if other people in my household did not look at it, I wouldn't even have one. But I think that's extremely insidious, and it's also set up to make people feel hopeless, to make them feel, if I don't agree with this crap, I'm all alone and can't do anything about it. If I do agree with it, then I'm the guy in this awful cartoon. And also a related thing, that the entire time I worked, I was very conscious of the fact that when I was a kid, there was still like a working class culture that people could be involved in. Unions were strong, and they were not just directed at wages and hours kind of stuff. They had a much larger social vision. And the union I belonged to, the IWW, really embracing social vision of a transformed society. But even in the CIO and the AFL, you had elements of that. And that's entirely disappeared now. Unions are not vehicles for anything except wages and hour stuff. And they're nearly extinct anyway. So,
your point about the atomization is undeniable. And in fact, it made me think, I think it's a New Yorker cartoon. Some cartoon shows the man, the bride and groom getting married. The priest is reading the ceremony and they're standing before the priest, and she's texting on her telephone. You go on the subway and everyone's plugged in their ears, right? So even if you aren't together physically, you're not together socially, You're right, it's a big problem. Atomization is a good name for it. And the working class culture has been attacked so much that it has no articulate, organized force to speak of. And the working class values are still there implicitly. They're not as explicit as they should be. When on the subway, if someone drops something, everyone says, "Man, you dropped your thing," or people get up and give a seat. I mean, there's a culture of solidarity, but it doesn't have organized form to shape society in a large scale by it. It's just your immediate little personal relations that are affected by it. So we're trying, what we're doing with TDR Boston is trying to create an explicit culture of working class values. That's what egalitarianism is. And we're trying to, I'm giving a talk on Tuesday, October 14th at the Nate Smith House in Jamaica Plain, 7:30. It'll be similar to the one here, so you're not missing much if you don't come to it. But we've been putting posters up, trying, to get people to come. People don't go to meetings today. It's like Naomi Klein was pointing out. People are cynical about, the value of going to a meeting.